Hola, buenos días a todos. ¿Qué tal? Les saluda Andrea Saavedra. Andrea Saavedra with the GABA team. And today we're going to be, I started in Spanish, but this class is actually in English. And that's one of the, that's one of the downsides of speaking both languages. But anyhow, today we're going to be going over the CMA, the competitor market analysis, and we're going to teach you how we work it and how we get to the price of a house. And let's get started because it's a long class and it has a lot of information in it. So let's put, I have a presentation like always. And let's see. I think it's this one. All right, perfect. So let's get going. Mastering the CMA from an appraiser's point of view. So I will tell you a little bit about myself. Our agenda today is our introduction is the course overview and questions and answers towards the end of the presentation. A little bit about myself. I lived in Houston for the past 30 years. I have been doing real estate for the past 20 years. Excuse me. I have been doing 2 years. I have been with the company of EXP Realty for the past 2 years. I'm a 2-time Icon agent. It's a recognition that they give us based on their sales. And I mostly do residential real estate. I'm a mother of 4 beautiful daughters, and I'm a happy wife. Today's course, it's going to be about mastering the CMA from an appraiser's point of view. And I will tell you the reason why I say an appraiser's point of view. That's because I have, throughout my career, throughout 20 years of being in real estate, I've speak with a lot of appraisers, either to, when I go to the listing appointment or when we have a listing, I go to the appraisal appointment and I speak with them, or to dispute an appraisal, or just to give them information about the property, right? Even if I'm representing the buyer. So I have had a lot of conversations with appraisers. I'm not saying that disclosure, I'm not saying that the way that we do the CMAs is actually doing an appraisal, because it's not. It's just using a lot of their matrix and making sure that it works for our CMAs, competitive market analysis, using their experience to the max, but as much as we can get from them. So module 1, we're going to be looking at the principles of pricing. It's the CMA, it's the purpose, it's who purchases the property, and then valuation language and code of ethics. Everything plays a role when you are doing and working on a competitor market analysis. We're going to understand everything. Now it's not about just going into the MLS and pulling comps and trying to come up with the best price of the house. It's actually understanding what comes behind it, what's behind it, and how you actually do a CMA, competitor market analysis. So first of all, what is a CMA? A competitor market analysis. And I like for my clients to always get very familiar with the terminology that we use in real estate, because they're going to hear it fairly often, right? And I speak both languages, as you've noticed, because I started in Spanish and then continued in English. But what that means is that especially when I'm representing Hispanics, I always want to make sure that they get used to the terminology in English, because they're going to hear it fairly often throughout their transactions. So I like to always refer this as the CMA, competitor market analysis. I have not even bothered to figure out what's the translation of it, again, because I want my people to be familiar with the terminology. A CMA reflects a licensed real estate broker's analysis of similar recently sold properties to derive an indication of the probable sales price of a particular property. So a CMA, and again, we disclose here, is not an appraisal and should not be referred as one. Okay, that's the main thing that as realtors we need to understand. We have to talk about what the property is worth, not necessarily the value, because we are not appraisers, and unless you have a license, you can only do a CMA, not necessarily an appraisal. There are 4 types of main valuation services for the properties, for the real estate or residential real estate transactions. We have the CMA, which again, it's an estimate of the probable selling price of a property. What that means is probable. It's not necessarily of the, we're insuring the price of the property. It's a probable selling price. Again, not value, but the selling price of the property. And who does the CMAs? Usually real estate licensees. So when someone tells you, or as a consumer tells you that someone that does not hold a real estate license will do a CMA, I would not necessarily trust 100% because I will be questioning the fact that they're using or utilizing the correct resources that we need in order to come up to the probable selling price of a property. Now, the appraisal, and that's the second step when pricing a property or second main valuation service, is defined as the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, the act of process of developing an opinion of value. And who does the appraisals? It's licensed and certified appraisers. As I said, when I started this presentation, we're not an appraiser because we don't hold a license. We're not certified to be appraisers. There's a lot that it takes for them to get their license or certification. And they are the ones that will be preparing the big reports. They'll go to the house, take measurements, take pictures, do an inspection on the house, and then come up with the actual value of the property. Okay, again, it's the act or process of developing an opinion of value. They are the ones that are giving value. Now, the automated valuation model, which is now really, you see it everywhere, right? You see it with Zillow, you see it in RPR, which is a system that we realtors use. We see it in HAR, Houston Association of Realtors. They'll be able to give us an automated valuation model. And you see when you are getting or pricing and a consumer is pricing a house, or trying to figure out what's the value of the house, they go out and take a look at these automated valuation models, which I don't necessarily, or I would not necessarily trust 100%. Why? Because it's just an automation. So that's a service or software that provides property valuations often based on mathematical modeling. So they get it. It's a software. It's not a person that went to the house and saw the house and told you, compared apple to apples with other properties. It's just an automated valuation model. And who uses these valuation models and why it's okay to use them in some instances and cases? It will be the lender, the servicer of the lender servicer or appraisal staff, an investor, and to be honest with you, even realtors. Because if I have someone coming to me and asking me, Andrea, I just bought my house last year and I want to sell my house. This market, it's possible that there's a chance that they might be able to sell that house and come up with the cost of selling the house within the equity of the house, right? Or the value of the house. But the only way to figure that out quick, and just so I know if I have a deal or not, I'm going to use the automated valuation model because it's going to tell me quick or give me an idea whether it's, the value is going to be there for me to actually have a transaction or for the seller to actually have some money into that they're not coming or bringing money to the table. All right. So automatic valuation models, again, they're not bad. It's just that they're not accurate 100%. And we know that with especially with Zillow, and we all know what happened with Zillow. They were pricing their properties that they're purchasing with their software, which, their algorithm didn't necessarily work to where they were making any profits out of these properties. That is a major reason why you should not trust 100% the automated valuation models. And then we have the broker price opinion, and that's an estimate of the probable selling price of a property. And who does the broker price opinions? The real estate licensees. Now, if you notice, and everybody please take a look and pay attention to this, we look at the definition of the CMA, and it's an estimate of the probable selling price of a property. We look at the broker price opinion, and it's an estimate of the probable selling price of a property. So it's exactly the same thing. Who does the CMA? Who does the broker price opinion? It's the real estate licensees. What that means is that it's almost the same thing. We can never compare to an appraiser, but with the broker price opinion, I will tell you the difference is that we go through a process of writing the CMA in a format that people expect or people like to. It's more. It looks. I want to say 25% like an appraisal report, but it's not necessarily the way that we realtors do a CMA. Okay, so it's just more formal way to give a price opinion. All right, so we're moving on, and I'm going to tell you, or we're doing this understanding the appraisal process from an appraiser's point of view. An appraiser was good enough to or share some information online, and I was able to get what they think, and it's important that we know that, because when we're pricing a property, you want to think as an appraiser. Why? Because they are the ones that are going to come up with the value. If unless you're selling a $50,000 property, there's or even if it's 100,000, 200, 300, 400,000, there's always a chance that someone is going to try to get financing to purchase that property. And if they're going to get financing, guess what? They're going to call an appraiser, and the appraiser is going to come and give you the value for that property. So we want to think the way that appraisers think. We want to know what they're thinking when they go take a look at the property and what they're looking for. So this is from an appraiser's point of view. The real estate flow example, they know this is how it goes. They want you to have a clear understanding of the whole process when they do an appraisal. So number one, the property goes under contract. Number two, the contract goes to the lender, right? Once we have a fully executed contract, then it goes to the bank so they can start the process of the loan. Number three, order goes to the order goes to the appraisal management company. So back in the days, again, I've been in the business for 20 years, and back in the days, you were able to choose your own appraiser, and not because they were doing any type of fraud, but they did catch that. And because they caught a lot of appraisers doing, committing fraud because they were bumping up the prices of the property, they got away with it. And they said, you know what, we're not going to allow for a realtor to actually choose the appraiser that's going to value the property. So what they did is they opened up a management appraisal company, and that appraisal management company is the one that sends the appraiser out to take a look at the property and give an opinion of value. Now, this appraiser, it gets chosen randomly. So once it goes to the appraisal management company picks an appraiser randomly of obviously in their list, and then that appraiser is going to be assigned to do an appraisal and an appraisal and possible an appraisal reinspection. But first, they're going to get assigned to do an appraisal, and then a value will be given to that property. And what happens after they do that, it goes through the lender. Appraisal management now chooses an appraiser, and now that appraiser is going to do first a field inspection, is what they call it. They're going to go take a look at the property. Remember that appraisers are the eyes of the lender. So the lender will send an appraiser to make sure that the property is worth, whatever they're trying to sell it for, or whatever they're lending money for. And therefore, they're going to go and make sure that that appraiser does, go take a look at the property. So first, they're going to do a field inspection. In that field inspection, they're going to probably review, they'll take a look at the roof. They'll take a look at the AC. If it's an FHA loan, there's a lot of requirements that they'll be, a lot of things that they'll be looking at. But that's the process. Once they do a field inspection, the next step is to do a report, to prepare the report, which is a long report that will have pictures of the properties, and they will have comparable properties and pictures of those properties as well. So if that appraisal is done and that property needs some type of repairs, let's say that the roof is worn out and the appraiser is calling for a new roof, then they have to do an appraisal reinspection. And then once that's all done, then we go to closing. So one issue in this process can add days, 2 weeks to the process, is not understanding or factoring that this can kill your deal, waste your time or your client's time and money. So it's important that realtors understand what is the whole process and why we need to be ready when we are, sending the appraiser to the property, because the property needs to be in good standing. It has to be in good condition for them to actually, for the appraisal, or for the appraiser not to delay the process of going through this. If they go to the property and they have to reinspect because the roof it's in bad condition, guess what? That's going to take longer, and that can possibly kill your deal. So it's important that we understand the real estate flow example. What's the problem that they see as well? that we have no clue as realtors, that we have no clue of USPA, which is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And you know what it takes to get an appraiser's license. It takes a lot. They have to do 200 appraisals under someone. I think that they have to be licensed. I'm sorry, they have to have a 2-year college at least, or if not 4 years of college. I mean, it's a lot. And understanding the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice is like understanding our code of ethics. It's, as realtors, they see that we don't know or understand what their standards are, but I don't necessarily feel that we need to understand them more than understand what they're looking for from us. And I mean, a lot of the times we see, and a lot of people tell me, I go to the appraisal appointment for my listings, and they're like, but don't go to the appointment because the appraiser don't want to see you there. And they're totally right. They don't want to see us there. Why? Because they feel that we don't have a clue of how they appraise properties. For instance, they say that we appraise properties, that we give a selling price of a property based on price per square footage, and they don't do it that way. They do it based on the sold price. So there are things that we don't understand. I don't necessarily feel that we need to fully understand them, but definitely have a sense as to how they work and what are their standards and what they go by in order for them to prepare an appraisal. So the 3 approaches to value, we have the sales comparison approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. And the main method for single-family residential properties, land, condominiums, manufactured homes, or 1 to 4 property units is the sales comparison approach. That's the one that we would normally use, or an appraiser would normally use in one of our properties. Again, it's the method for single-family residential, land, condos, manufactured homes, and 1 to 4 units. Okay. Now the sales. So we're going to concentrate on this one. The sales comparison approach, this is the approach most commonly associated with the use of comparables. So this is where they come up and say, okay, this is where we use comparables, where we say, hey, we're comparing this property to this other property, and has to be compared based on, all the criteria, and it has to be we have to be comparing apples to apples. So this is the approach most commonly associated with the use of comparables. The appraiser seeks enough comparables and makes adjustments to comparable selling prices according to the various factors of comparison. And this is just a definition from Wikipedia. And then we have another one from Investopedia. And the terms of comparison, the term sales comparison approach refers to a real estate appraisal method that compares one property to comparables or other recently sold properties in the area with similar characteristics. Now, from this, we understand that we have to be comparing properties based on the properties that have sold in the area. And now, what is a comparable? A comparable property must be relevant in terms of features and attributes that are determinants of value in a market within a given time frame. Okay. Comparables are homes of similar age, location, size, condition that have recently sold or are listed for sale. Okay. So this is important because this is where we know, okay, number one, we already know that we have to pick up comparables, okay, in order to come up with the value of the property, an opinion of value if you're an appraiser, or excuse me, a selling price for a real estate agent. But now, how do I choose my comparables? I need to understand what's behind it, right? So this is what we need to look into. We have to look at properties that are similar in size, age, location, condition, and that they have recently sold. Sometimes I've seen CMAs of people bring me, I compare properties of, are comparing the subject property to properties that sold 2 years ago. And I'm like, no. But again, this is what this class is doing for you. Okay, so it's going to teach you all the reasons why and how we do a CMA. The comparables, examples of key features, it's going to be, so this is what they're looking at. Okay, they're looking at number one, location. This is ground zero. This is where you start at. Again, you have a property, you have it right here, and you're going to start going like this. I actually have a chart for this, but you're going to start going like this and try to find the comparables around that specific location. So that's the main thing they're going to be looking. That's your ground zero. And then we're going to be looking at the size of the house, then at the age of the house, Then at the style of the house, then the bedroom count, the bathroom count, the views, the condition, the quality, the lot size, the sell date, and on and on and on. And this is the reason why hiring a professional to do your comparable CMA, comparable market analysis, is important. Why? Because they have to have all this knowledge in order to perform one. If you, as a realtor, don't have this knowledge, how are you going to perform an accurate CMA? You know, sellers can lose money on the table, buyers can lose out on offers if we don't do a good comparable market analysis. So let's take a look at some properties. This is a subject home on the left-hand side. And there's some terminology that we will learn. The subject house, it's going to be the one that we're comparing to, the one that I'm selling, the one that I'm, getting a listing on, the one that I'm my client wants to put in an offer. That's going to be my subject house. Okay, so this is the property that's being appraised or valued. This is the subject property. And the comparable properties are the ones that we're comparing to. So that's the home closed, active, or pending that have most key or relative factors. Again, comparables, in my opinion, they will choose some closed properties and some active, maybe one or two. The appraiser will use some of them, and some pending transactions, but normally the price will be given on the properties that have sold in the area. Okay, so those are comparables. Now they will do adjustments, okay, and they say an adjusted value is price something sold for, listed for, or pending. Those are the comparables that sold or are actually pending. Adjusted value is price after all adjustments for comparisons are done. So once they pick the unadjusted value of every single one of the properties, let's say they picked out 6 properties. Okay, so it's 6. Usually they gotta pick 3, but let's say that we sold 5 properties, so that's the unadjusted value. And once they take a look at the subject property, which is the property that we're trying to get the value for, and they take a look at all the comparables, then they'll come to the adjusted value. They will make adjustments. Okay, that's another thing that we don't necessarily as realtors understand much. But appraisers, they do a really good job with that. I don't, as a professional, I don't necessarily get too much into the adjusted value of the property, because again, I'm not an appraiser, and I don't get to do like a very detailed report like they do. If the subject is superior in a feature, you're going to add to the price. So that's how adjustments work. If the subject is inferior in a feature, then you're going to deduct from the price. That's how they do the adjustments. Okay, that's another thing that the appraisers think, that we don't know how to do those adjustments, and that's why they don't like the way that we price houses. Okay, but anyhow, this is a subject property 101 Smith, and it has 1,300 square feet. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, back traffic street. That has a lot to do with, coming up with the value of a property. It has no updates. It has a 1-car garage, excessive wear and tear. And on the right-hand side, you see something that's similar actually in the square footage, maybe the bedrooms and 1 bath. It backs green space instead of a traffic street. It's got it remodeled. It's been got it remodeled. Everything's new on it. 1-car garage, and it's almost like new. Obviously, this is not going to be a good comparable. Why? Because the properties don't look alike at all. They might be the same square footage or similar square footage, but the condition of the house is completely different. So that's how adjustments work. They're going to be probably on this one, they're probably going to be using the same property because there's no more and they weren't able to find any comparables, but they're going to do a lot of adjustments based on the square footage, on the condition and everything. Okay, so that's how the adjustments work. Now, the appraisers and the solutions that they find in order to, for them to like our work and how we price a house, it's we need to understand an adjusted versus adjusted value, because sometimes we come up with the value of a property, the price of a property, and then they come up with the value and the value is completely different. Why? Because they have done a lot of adjustments. So they want us to understand the difference and explain it to our sellers, because when the appraisal is worked out and we're not necessarily doing or given the price, or the property didn't meet value, then guess what? The seller's going to be coming back to us and say, hey, what happened? You told me this. So the appraisers want us to make sure that we explain this very well to the sellers, and that we understand it as well. Because when the price or the appraisal comes in and we take a look at it, it's like, oh, well, let me go to the page where there's all of the adjustments and try to understand as much as possible. And the basic guide is, if the subject is superior in a feature, again, you're going to add to the price and deduct to the price. So it's fairly simple. However, what's not simple is coming up with the difference or the adjustment. For instance, what's the adjustment for a property that has 2 bedrooms and this one has 1 bedroom? Okay, so that's the difference. And that's what we're going to try to figure out here. The purpose of CMAs, of competitor. So that's what I just finished explaining to you. It's the way that appraisers look at us, and they think that we're not necessarily knowledgeable of their process, and they want us to understand it. Appraisers can be our friends if you want to make them your friend. Okay, I go to that appraisal appointment every time that I have a listing. I try to go for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm doing a good service to my seller when I go, because I will bring in comps. I will bring in a remodeling sheet if they have done any work to the property. I will come and let the appraiser know why the property is worth this much. But there's a couple of reasons. Again, number one, bring in everything that I need to do for my seller in that house to be priced at the highest. Number two is to make sure that I ask a couple of questions to the appraiser, so I know more and more how to come up with the value of the properties. Now, the purpose of CMAs. The purpose of a CMA is to establish an accurate range of value for a property that a seller wishes to sell or buyer wishes to buy. An accurate range is one that reflects market conditions at the time and place of the desired transaction. Once an accurate property value range is determined, the further purpose of a CMA is to help sellers identify an asking price or buyers identify an offer price. In other words, a CMA provides an objective, market-driven starting point for pricing properties. Now, how does this help your seller? And why is it important for sellers to hire a professional that will literally do a really good CMA? I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. So how do you do this? How do you make sure that your sellers are getting max for their property, And how do you make sure that your buyers are putting in the right offer for that property? It helps a ton. It helps a lot. I mean, we put in an offer on a house that was a house that was selling for $300,000. We came out with a CMA of $225,000. Appraiser went in. He got a value for $220,000. We were able to dispute the value to $224,000, and my client was able to buy that property for $229,000, paying $5,000 above that $224,000. Why? Because he really wanted that property. And why were we able to tell him and walk him through the whole process of getting under contract in a property that's extremely highly priced? It's because we did a CMA prior to even submitting an offer. So for those people that are not doing or preparing a CMA when you're putting in an offer, you're losing out big time. Because if I'm able to find out, what if it's backwards? What if there's a property has so many offers and I only have conventional financing with no additional funds? If I can tell that the property or CMA can be, high, $10,000, $15,000 above, then what happens? If I did a CMA, it's well done with as much knowledge as possible. I can literally say, yes, we can go above $10,000, and we can even sign an appraisal waiver because the property, it's more likely to appraise based on my CMA. There's so many things you can do if you have this knowledge. Okay, who needs the CMAs? Again, it's needed by buyers. It's needed by sellers and realtors. A well-researched CMA is a listing agent's greatest tool in pricing a home appropriately. Now, why is this important for the seller? Much more important for the seller, because you don't want to come up with the underprice the house and they're losing out thousands of dollars because of the way that you're doing a CMA. So that's the reason why it's super important to know how to do a CMA. What are the advantages of CMAs for? The sellers receive a fact-based objective assessment of their home's value. They don't experience any stress or disruption that can occur when houses languish in the market. The sellers are protected from undervaluing their property to their financial disadvantage. Guys, take this in consideration, especially realtors that are listening to me out there. I can't stress enough how important it is for you to know how to do a competitor market analysis. You do not want your client to come after you in the future to tell you that the property could have been worth a lot more money. I do my CMAs, and my client initials that CMA. Why? Because this is the information that I have. This is the information that I was able to come up with. And I also have a disclosure in there letting them know that I'm not an appraiser, but I'm doing the best I can to give them a sales price for the property. So it's important that you understand how it can impact the way that you do a CMA your seller. It can be bad financially. The buyers receive a fact-based, objective information about the homes that they might not be familiar with the local market, so they can lose out on a house if they really like it because their offer is too low. And that, again, goes for the buyers. The buyers are less likely to encounter problems obtaining a mortgage because the house appraises below offer price. Now, you don't want your buyer to get under contract and the property might not appraise and they're not aware of it. With this situation that I just told you about a few minutes ago, the buyer was well aware of it, and I was able to tell him, hey, Mr. Buyer, this is what I can see. The property is not going to be worth this much. And it's actually not only $10,000, $5,000, overpriced. It's $80,000 or $75,000 overpriced. So what we're going to do is we can get under contract. I feel that if I follow the correct negotiation strategy that I have for it, that we're going to be able to close on this property. But there's a risk. If the property comes down at the value that I'm thinking is going to, and the property does not, and then the seller does not want to reduce the sales price, guess what? We're going to have to probably terminate this transaction. I'm going to protect you on the contract. However, there's a chance that we might not close on it. You are running that risk. I'm running the risk of working for you without getting paid on that specific transaction, because it's literally possibly doing inspections, going through the whole process of submitting an offer, everything, and just for us to figure out or find out that the seller won't reduce, and now we have to pay this much for, or now we have to terminate the deal. So as long as your people know and are aware of it, then there's no risk. I mean, there's no reason why not to continue with the transaction, right? Because there's a chance that you might win, and my chances of winning, it's about 95%. I also tell them that. Every time we do this, every time both you buyers and I take the risk of going forward with this transaction, as long as we know what we're getting into, this is how much money you're going to lose. The inspection, the money for the inspection, and the option fee, and the appraisal. So you can lose up to $1,000 to $1,200. But guess what? There's just a chance, a 5%, 10% based on my experience. If for any reason we don't follow on with the transaction, then guess what? You literally purchased a house that was on the market for $300,000. Yes, it's not worth $300,000, but you had the chance to get the house for $229,000. So I mean, what is the benefits are incredible. Okay, so always do CMAs for your buyers. The agents listing on language, for listing agents, for your buyers, for your sellers, this market, especially right now in the market we're in, if you know how to do a CMA, you're going to spend less time putting in offers for your buyers because you know how to play with the numbers. But if you don't know how to play with the numbers, it's going to be really hard because you don't know if the property can be worth more. And even though your buyers don't have the cash to come out with extra to win that house, you could possibly, if the house is worth more money. So it's going to save you a lot of time with your sellers, a lot of time with your buyers, and therefore more of a chance to make more income if you represent more people in that amount of time. Valuation language and basic principles. Again, it's important that you become familiar with these principles and the valuation language. Why? Because you're going to be seeing it throughout your career, throughout the transaction, if you're just a buyer or a seller. But subject is the subject property. We talk about that. Comparable, it's a sold property that they're comparing your property to. Competition, it's again the comparables, the competition we're seeing, the competition, it's going to be the properties that are active in the market right now, or possibly pending. Adjustments are, again, the adjustments that they make in order to come up with the actual value of the property. Again, if a property has 3 bedrooms and another one has 2 bedrooms, well, they'll make an adjustment in value for that bedroom that the other property doesn't have, okay? The neighborhood, the appraisers are going to be using that word a lot because they want to make sure that the comparables are within the neighborhood. The cost, the single family residence, that's usually, you see it a lot, but a lot of people don't know the meaning of it, especially if you're a buyer or seller. If you're a realtor, I expect that you know the meaning of that, but it's single family residence, the price, and the market value. Again, the market value of the property. Okay, now, understanding where it all comes from. And guys, it's the government. I mean, everything comes from up there. Everything comes from the government. It's rules that the government has. And it's and we're going to talk about Fannie Mae guidelines for the appraisals, okay? The market value is the most probable price that a property should bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale. The buyer and seller, each acting prudently, listen to that, prudently, knowledgeably, and assuming the price is not affected by undue stimulus. Implicit in this definition is the consummation of a sale of a specified date and the passing of title from seller to buyer under conditions whereby the buyer and seller are typically motivated. Both parties are well informed or well advised, and each acting in what he or she considers his or her own best interest. A reasonable time is allowed to exposure in the open market. Now, listing agents, get worried about this one. A reasonable time is allowed for exposure in the open market. So if you guys are getting mad because a listing agent is asking for the property to be on the market for 5 days, and they're not going to consider any offers until then, and you were the first one to put in an offer on that house, well, guess what? Government calls for that. They're asking for us to do that. It's the law. It's what we're supposed to do. So let's be less judgmental when we see those situations. Then a payment is made in terms of cash in US dollars or in terms of financial arrangements compared to thereto, and the price represents the normal consideration for the property sold and affected by special creative financing or sales concessions granted by anyone associated with the sale. Okay, so this last paragraph is important. Or sentence, what does that mean? That means that the value of the property can be affected if the seller helped with closing costs and if there was creative financing. What's creative financing? Anything that's not traditional lending. So what's traditional lending first, so you can understand it? Traditional lending will be conventional loans, will be FHA loans, VA loans, USDA loans, all those, right? And then you have your creative financing, which is what they're talking about right here. It's owner finance, hard money lending, cash. Why? This is not necessarily creative financing, but why does it affect? Because with traditional lending, there was an appraisal done, and they're going to try. And if we're doing an appraisal for this property, that means, it's financing is possibly involved, and therefore they're going to try to compare with properties that were financed. But they cannot compare a property that sold FHA and had an appraisal with what they call it, the owner financing strategy. Why? Because the owner financing strategy is basically an investor that's trying to sell the property to the max without doing any repairs and charging a high interest rate and all that stuff. But they usually bump up or inflate the sales price of the property by 15 to 20%. So we don't want to compare this property that's, all financed, and all of these properties were financed, with the property that they might have bumped up the price 20%. And that puts us in a disadvantage on, coming up with the value of a property. So that's what it means. And these are Fannie Mae guidelines, guys. This is the government. This is not, we decide how to do a CMA. It comes from above, pricing and the Realtor Code of Ethics. So let's continue on with the Code of Ethics, with the rules, regulations, law, and everything. Article 11 focuses on the real estate agent's role and responsibilities in listing properties. advertising, representing a seller or buyer, and concluding transactions. Article 11 also speaks to the issue of a real estate professional's responsibilities when preparing an opinion of property value or price. Guys, how important is this? This is, you have to know how to do a CMA. Basically, this is telling you, you have to know how to do a CMA, yes or yes. There's no other option, because as a professional real estate agent, you're supposed to represent your buyer and seller correctly with, and help them with, coming up with the price, the sales price of the property. So this is something that you have to know how to do. And if for any reason any buyer thought that you told them that the selling price of the property is low, or a seller comes back to you and say, hey, you know what, you told me that the selling price of my house was this much, but then I find out that it's worth $40,000 more. Guess what? Now I'm suing you because you gave me the wrong price of the house. Now, can they? Heck yeah. Are they going to win? Heck yeah. Why? Because we have a code of ethics in which it states that we're supposed to know this information. So that's how important it is. Let's continue a little bit more, and not because I want to scare you. It's just I want to bring awareness to all realtors out there and let you know how important it is for you to know how to do this CMA. Standard Practice 11 reads, 11.1, when realtors prepare opinions of real property value or price, they must, it doesn't say they should, which is a difference between should and must, right? They must be knowledgeable about the type of property it's being valued. They must have access to the information and resources. I'm scared when I hear that a realtor, it just has a real estate license, but they're not members of the board. Why? Because that means they don't have all the resources that are being provided to us through the board. So it's important that, hey, have everything that you can have in order to be able to have information and resources to come up with the selling price of a property. Again, it says, and resources necessary to formulate an accurate opinion, and be familiar with the area where the subject property is located. So if you never sold a house in that area, how are you going to know, what's happening? How are you going to know how to price a property? So we have to become knowledgeable of an area. If it's, Cypress, be knowledgeable of Cypress. Katy, Sugarland, Houston, the whole Houston area, fine. As long as you become more and more knowledgeable, you're going to be able to price more and more properties. Another thing that realtors must do is, unless log of any of this is disclosed to the party requesting the opinion in advance. Now, it's okay for you not to be able to do all of this, as long as you tell the seller or the buyer, I'm going to give you an opinion, or an opinion of the sales price of this property, but I'm not a board member of Houston Association of Realtors, and therefore I don't have all the resources to really complete and come up with an accurate selling price of your property. Again, everything, it's all about disclosures. You have to disclose and let everybody know why you're not doing this. For instance, let's say that I get, and I get these phone calls a lot. Can you please represent me to sell my property in, let's say Huntsville, Texas? And to be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the area. And as long as I disclose, it's okay. I can possibly do a CMA based on the resources and information I can get from my board, but I have to let them know. So I will normally say, you know what, I'm not familiar with that area, but I will be more than happy to help you find an agent there that can help you, come up with the value or the selling price of your property. Or we can hire an appraiser and get that taken care of. So as long as you disclose, there's no problems. But if not, but it's going to be embarrassing to tell someone, hey, I don't know how to do that. Please forgive me, but here is the value of your property. Get knowledgeable, okay? Then they talk about, the value or price, and that's the reason why I get confused about, especially when giving this class, because I have to mention so much about the selling price and the value of the property, opinion of value. And it tells you here the reason why we shouldn't be, as realtors, saying that we're getting the value of the property instead of the price. And I'll tell you why. There's a reason. A lot of us, we just hear that you can't do this, but there's a reason for that. Article 11, And it's a standards of practice use the terms value or price and price to mean the same thing. Okay, so if we go with the code of ethics, they feel that price and value, they mean the same thing. But you should be aware that among real estate professionals and in different states, these terms are sometimes used to refer to different practitioners and tasks. The terms value and valuation sometimes are reserved to pertain to appraisals and the work of appraisers, whereas pricing pertains to CMAs, listing prices, and the work of real estate brokers and agents. In some states, agents are able to value. They're not allowed to perform BPOs. In some states, they can do an appraisal. So is it saying that we're like completely, especially, me giving this class and, getting confused with value and selling price? Are we going to be completely, judged and with the code of ethics is going to say, hey, you did this bad and you're not supposed to do it? No, because per what they think or what they say, they feel that price and value mean the same thing. But again, for appraisers, they will use more the word value, and for others, and for us, we're going to use the CMAs. All right. Again, I try to be very careful, not because, it's because we're supposed to not be using the word value a lot, because that's usually reserved for an appraiser. All right. But you're not going to be completely penalized if you do, so don't worry too much about it. But yes, try to, separate them. Now, and the reason I say that is because the sellers might get confused and might say, hey, you always told me that the value of my property was no, sir. I told you that the sales price of your property was this much. Okay. Now, choosing appropriate comparables. So we're going to look at some steps in doing that. And now this is how we come up with our comps. And this is how we come up with the value of the property. So optimal similarity to the subject. The general parameters for choosing comparables are determined by the subject home, the subject's number of bedrooms and bathrooms, the size of its living space and lot, the neighborhood and school district in which it's located, and the age and condition of the property. All of these characteristics form the parameters for choosing comparables. For sellers out there, you need to understand that this is everything that an appraiser is going to be looking at when they're coming up with the value of your property. Optimal similarity to the subject. And then we have the central goal in preparing a CMA is identifying comparables that are similar as possible, physically, functionally, and geographically to the subject. The more similar the comparable, the fewer adjustments you will need to make, and the more accurately you can determine the value of the subject and price it correctly. So remember, I have been speaking throughout the whole presentation, and I told you that I do not like to use adjustments. I don't, because I'm not an appraiser. So what I will try to do every single time when I'm doing an appraisal, I'm going to try to find properties that compare as close as possible to my property based on these characteristics. What are those characteristics? As I mentioned, agents preparing CMAs must consider a variety of characteristics in identifying potential comparables and must aim for an adequate number of comparables to consider informing their price opinion. Now, the date of the sale of the property. Comparables date of sale should fall within 90 to 180 days of the CMA research. What that means is that, number one, I'm able to now figure out, okay, let me look and compare apples to apples, and this is what I'm going to be finding, my comparables. Now I have to look at the properties that sold in the last 90 to 180 days. Why 90 days? Especially this market and the craziness of it, and how the properties are going up in value within, months. You have to go as little as 90 days, as much as 180 days. Try not to go, but you will. If you've been in the business long enough, and okay, last year, how was the market? That's the first question you need to ask yourself. If I can find any comparables close to my property in the last 6 months, can I possibly go a little bit higher than that? If so, what is best to go? To 9 months? I will go month by month to 7 months, because the closer it is to the closing date, the better, right? To today's date, the better. So that's what you do. Go take a look and see, how was the market last year? Was it the same? last year it's almost the same or similar. And how do I get that how do I get that information? Like, you take a look at the market right now and see how it compared from last year. And if it did compare, then you could possibly go up to a year, up to 6 months. I would go 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, up to a year. Okay. Compare location. Comparables should be as geographically similar to the subject as possible. So you have to be as close as possible to the house that you're comparing to. Now, there are 3 ways to determine what's the location of the property. So we have suburban, city, and rural. Suburban is the same subdivision or neighborhood, the same school district, and 1 mile radius if possible. Now, it says 1 mile radius. That doesn't mean you're going to go 1 mile. I go 0.25 miles, 0.50 miles, 0.75, and then I go up to a mile. If it's the city, you're looking at condominiums in the same complex or building. One complex in a condominium or where a condominium is located can be totally different from the complex next door. Completely different. I've seen this on Tidwell. There's this apartment complex or condominium complex. It's just bad. It's really, really bad. And I mean, I went there once and I was like, what in the world? Am I going to get out of here alive? But then you go to the complex next door and it's completely nice and nice people live there. So there's a huge difference. So that's the reason why when it's a condo, you have to compare, hopefully in the same complex or building or half a mile radius if possible. Then rural areas is 5 miles. You look within 5 miles if possible. If not possible, stay within the area as buyers define, the school district and stuff like that. And you can go up to 10 miles. I've seen that. Now, the size of the property. Okay, so now we're looking at the characteristics one by one. Okay, and just so you know, guys, I'm probably going to be breaking this in 2 classes because there's a lot to cover with the CMA. But we're going to have this recorded, and then we're probably going to do a second class because I don't think I'm going to have enough time to finish in an hour. But anyhow, we're looking at the size of the property now. Comparables should be the same size or close to the same size as the subject in terms of both living area and lot size. So what is the range of the square footage that we need to be in between? 15 to 20%. So if my subject property has 1,500 square feet, then I have to be between 1,275 and 1,725 square feet. That will be my first option, which is the 15%. And then if I can't find anything there, then I'm going to go up to 20% from the subject property, and that's going to be between 1,200 square feet and 1,800 square feet. I try not to go that route, but hey, if I'm not able to find any comparables, that's what I'm going to do. So that's how we look at the size of the property. Now let's take a look at amenities. Okay, one is probably going to have a swimming pool, and another one's just going to have a patio, or some will have a patio, some won't have a patio. These are things that will definitely make an impact on the value of a property. Okay, it's on the appraisal, and this is where you can possibly spend money on. A lot of sellers will call me and say, hey, Andrea, I want to put this $15,000, $20,000 wood floors in my house. Well, unless I let the appraiser know that you spend that much money, they're not going to give you value dollar per dollar, but they will be comparing properties that have wood floors. And if you spend $20,000, guess what? Sometimes they're not even going to know that. Okay, so be very careful with the things that really will add up value to your house. Now, we have a swimming pool that's going to add value to the house. That's on the appraisal. The patio, the fireplace, the landscaping of the house. Those are things that you should be spending money on in order to bring up the value of the house if you're a seller. Now, improvements. Right here, I have a couple of pictures. You see one that is a garage and it's used for its purpose. And then you see a converted garage. Now, if we have a converted garage, and I'm going to talk about my area and where I live and where I sell houses, which, it's Houston. And I'm going to give you 2 different areas just so you know the impact and how important it is for you to know your market and how important it is for you to, advise your buyers and sellers correctly. If I am trying to sell a house in Cypress, and majority of the houses have a 2-car garage, okay? Let's say that garage, which I did see it, one time I went to go see a house there. That garage was converted, but not into another room or a living area. It was converted into another kitchen. And you're thinking, okay, why? I don't know why, but the garage had a kitchen, completely bigger kitchen than actually the one that was inside the house. So the garage is converted into another kitchen. Now, again, appraisers are comparing apple to apples. Where in Cyprus, to be honest with you, when in my whole life have I ever seen a second kitchen in the garage? Never. That's red flag immediately. Okay. The first question that I'm going to ask, if I'm that time I was representing the buyer, I'm sorry. So I asked, and the sellers were there, and I said, okay, so, and then I spoke to the listing agent. I said, my clients like the property, but what's with that? What's with that kitchen in the garage? They want a garage. They don't necessarily want a kitchen. Oh, well, we'll go ahead and tear it down and just convert it back into a garage. See, that's an expense that the seller should have never gone through. You don't know, because the garage smell like food and the house smell really nice. So I don't know, maybe they did see that value. However, they spent thousands and thousands of dollars converting that garage, which is something that I would not recommend to a seller. Why? Because you have never seen in that specific area a garage converted into a kitchen. Now, let's talk about this similar scenario, but not in Cyprus. This is close to Martin Luther King, and that area where when the houses were built, the houses were very small. They had a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, 1 car garage. Okay. Well, now things change. If you convert that car garage into a bedroom, and please add a bathroom to it, now you're bringing up the value of the property. So these are improvements that will either increase or decrease the value of a house, and you have to be to know what's going to put more value and more money into your pocket if you're a seller, or you as a realtor, a professional, what's going to put more money into their pocket, right? Remodel kitchen and outdated kitchen. That's usually all the time. If it's a remodel kitchen, it's definitely going to go up in value. It's a great improvement. And if you have an outdated kitchen, well, that's going to stay not necessarily low value, but you're not going to see the benefit of the value that a remodel kitchen puts into the property. How many comparables you need to come up with? Okay, so comparables are properties that have sold in the area, and the appraisers will normally get 3+ comparables. And I normally see an average of 3 sold comparables in the report, but I have seen up to 5. And I guess that's where, they have so much data that they just added more comparables in there, or they're trying to come, a point across. When you see all of these properties, that's why they came up with the value of this property. So 3+ comparables are definitely what I've seen, the average. And then the 2 to 3 active pending competition, they will get, sometimes the appraisers will get an active, they will get a pending property that they're, pending is what we're up against, and they'll put it in the report. Not, again, I've spoken to an appraiser that he mentioned that those properties don't necessarily add value. It just makes up the case to where they're coming up with the value. I hear this a lot, excuse me, where realtors tell me, I can't find any comps. And I just like, no, please. There are comps. If an appraiser goes, then you say, okay, well, who's going to give me a value of this property? You are a realtor, you're a professional, you need to come up with the comparables. And again, the more you know, the more you're taking these classes or other classes, or, there are enough comparables. You can find comparables. There's no such thing as there's no comparables. So if you can find any comparables within the 15% square footage range that you're supposed to be within, then go up to 20. If you can find comparables within that first mile that I mentioned about, you can go up to 3 miles. And I've seen even 5 miles locally. Then you can spend again to 9 to 12 months if you can find anything within the first 6 months. Remember, you have to find comparables. I can see my subject property here and then the other properties. I did this, actually, a lot of the material that we have, we actually produce. And that one, I produced this chart. I told my husband, I said, I want to be able to explain to the sellers why I cannot go pick this comparable up here or this comparable up here outside, because I have to pick the ones that are closer to my subject property. Okay, so that's why I did the chart. And last but not least, because we're running out of time, comparables do not need to be identical to the subject, but they should be as similar as possible, similar physical and legal characteristics. Comparables should appeal to the same probable buyers, market participants as the subject, who's actually buying these properties. If a chosen comparable is significantly different from the subject, it is necessary to adjust its price to reflect the differences. Consider these factors in the market value. So if I'm going to go all the way to make adjustments on the property, I would say don't do it yourself. That's when you can let the seller or the buyer know, until we do an appraisal, is when we're going to be able to figure out what are the adjustments that they can do so they can come up with the correct value of your property. Comparables should come from within the same neighborhood as the subject whenever possible. But this guideline is flexible if the best comparables available are in competing neighborhoods. And if true comparables cannot be found at all for the subject, because remember, we say sometimes that there's no comparables, it might be necessary to use very different properties as comparables. So even if there are no comparables, you can use other properties that are different, and just make sure that you know as much as you can on how to handle and how to figure out what the adjustments are. All right, guys, so that's pretty much it for today. I think this is half of the class, because let me see how many slides I have. Yeah, it's half of the class, or a little bit more than half the class. So we'll probably going to have our next class next week on the CMA, and hopefully you learned some from this class. And if you have any questions, you can post them there, please, and let me know if there's anything we can help with. I have Sharon, and let's see, she has a question. Can I ask for an appraisal if I'm buying cash? Totally. As you know, and I never mentioned, mostly financing lenders or finance lenders, they will ask and request an appraisal. But if you have a cash buyer, and I will do a CMA, and I feel very confident that my CMA was done correctly, then I will let them know. But I will also advise them and tell them, hey, you have the right to do an appraisal on the property. You're buying it for this amount of money, and you can do an appraisal. And as long as I gave him kind of a value and let him know, or not the value, again, the sales price of the property, then I'm confident that, on my numbers, and an appraisal will come in. And if it's, at the price, that's good. If not, then I'll be doubting my CMAs. No, I'm kidding. Normally, it doesn't happen with us. But yeah, you can, because the buyer wants to make sure that the property is, valued at the amount that they're buying it. At that point, it will not get order from a management company. That's when you can actually use your resources, and you have probably a list of appraisers that you can go and request an appraisal from. It's not necessarily from a management company. There are some appraisers that can do individual jobs like that, but that's only for cash properties, because they're not necessarily, a cash buyer don't have to follow with the rule that the lender has, that they have to order an appraisal from an appraisal management company. So yes, to respond to your question, you can. All right, do we have any other questions? Okay. All right, guys, so that's pretty much it for today. I hope that this class was helpful, and I will see you on the next one. Have a great day.